The sun blazed high above the sleepy village. Dust rose in golden spirals with each firm step of Ibrahim Traoré as he walked alone along the old road leading to his grandmother's house. It was no ordinary day. Something weighed on his chest, an unease he couldn't name. Since dawn, a forgotten letter among his recently deceased father's belongings had been like a silent fire in his mind. A yellowed paper, handwritten, with words that seemed to call to him across time. Traoré clenched his fist, feeling the folded parchment in his hand. Each heartbeat seemed to echo on the deserted road. Memories came in waves, childhood running through the fields, his father's tough but loving teachings, his grandmother's stern gaze, always wrapped in silence about certain matters of the past. There were things never told to him, secrets that now seemed to beg for revelation. The mud house, simple and ancient, appeared before him like a silent monument from another era. The thatched roof, the time-worn wooden windows, and the scent of dry leaves burning in the distance created an almost sacred atmosphere. Traoré took a deep breath before pushing the heavy door, which creaked as if in protest. Inside, seated in a rocking chair that seemed as old as the earth itself, was his grandmother, Maimouna. Her skin, wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree, and her eyes, gleaming with unfathomable wisdom, watched him without surprise. It was as if she already knew he would come. Without a word, she pointed to a small box, covered by a faded red cloth, resting on a cracked wooden table. Traoré approached, his heart beating erratically. When he removed the cloth, he saw an ebony box, carved with ancient symbols he didn't fully recognize but instinctively felt were significant. Maimouna spoke, her voice faint like a whisper of wind through trees. The truth you seek is inside. But beware, Ibrahim. Not every truth brings peace. With steady hands but a spirit in turmoil, Traoré opened the box. Inside he found scrolls, old photographs, and a gold medallion. He picked up the medallion first. Engraved on it was the symbol of a lion, wreathed in flames. The words around it were written in an ancestral language he couldn't read, but somehow understood. Leadership is an inheritance of fire and sacrifice. The first photograph was of Traoré's great-grandfather, a man with a resolute gaze, dressed in warrior's garb. In the background, an ancient flag bearing the same flaming lion. On another scroll, more words forgotten by the years. The lineage of guardians must never bow to corruption. Protect the people, even if it costs everything. The ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. All his life, Traoré had thought his strength came solely from discipline, from courage forged in recent battles, from the sheer will to resist modern oppressions. But now he saw there was something deeper, an inherited mission, a promise made generations before he was born. Maimouna continued, her voice now tinged with restrained emotion. Your great-grandfather, Yakuba, led a forgotten revolt. He fought against those who enslaved our land in exchange for empty promises. He died betrayed by his own brothers. This pain was buried, but the mission never died. The air grew heavy. The walls of the small house seemed to close in around Traoré. He understood in that moment. Leadership was not just a choice. It was a destiny, a burden to be carried with honor, but also with the courage to face the betrayals, sacrifices, and loneliness that would come. He sat, head in his hands, as the sun sank outside, painting everything in gold and red. The words echoed in his mind like distant war drums, inheritance of fire and sacrifice. It wasn't just about governing, it was about protecting. It was about dying, if necessary, to preserve the dignity of the people. Rising with a new determination etched in his eyes, Traoré turned to his grandmother. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice carrying the strength of a man who knew he could no longer turn back. Maimouna smiled, a sad and proud smile. "Remember who you are, and never trade your soul." That night, as stars slowly emerged in the vast sky, Ibrahim sat before a fire in the yard, the medallion hanging around his neck, the scrolls spread out before him. A warm wind blew from the desert, carrying the echoes of past generations. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw unfamiliar faces, felt battles fought long before his time, heard promises whispered under a full moon. He felt the weight of history on his shoulders, but also a new flame in his chest, something nothing could extinguish. The next morning, his decision was made. He would no longer be just one ruler among many. He would be the guardian of an ideal, the living flame of an ancestral promise. He left the village before dawn, the road ahead shrouded in golden mist. Each step was heavy, but also filled with purpose. Traoré knew he would face more cunning enemies, deeper betrayals, more piercing pains. But he also knew now that he was walking the same path traced by men and women who never knelt. And somewhere, in the rustle of dry leaves, in the whisper of the wind, he seemed to hear the voice of his ancestors, repeating ceaselessly, "Protect the people. At all costs." The future called. And Ibrahim Traoré, son of a lineage of fire and sacrifice, would not hesitate. The city felt different when Ibrahim Traoré returned. The dirt streets, the unfinished concrete houses, the squares where children played makeshift soccer. Everything seemed to carry an invisible weight, as if the very ground knew something was about to change. The people greeted him with respect, but also with hidden hope in their eyes, as if they sensed a new chapter approaching. But Traoré knew, before he could honor the promise inherited from his ancestors, he would need to confront the truth about those around him. There were silent betrayals within his own circle, people who, under the guise of help and loyalty, served foreign interests, hidden ambitions, and greed. The first council meeting was tense. In the austere room, surrounded by walls stained by heat and time, sat men and women with hardened faces and wary eyes. Each carried a story, an ambition, a silent debt. Traoré remained standing, the medallion hidden beneath his simple cotton shirt, but feeling its warmth against his skin like a living flame. He looked each one in the eyes, unhurried, letting silence fill the space like an advancing tide. "The time has come to decide," he said finally, his voice low but sharp as a honed blade. "To decide between serving the people or betraying their future." Some looked away. Others crossed their arms defensively. One man in particular, Idrissa, his longtime advisor, raised his chin in a defiant gesture. "The people need stability, Ibrahim, agreements, alliances." Idrissa spoke like someone who had already chosen his side. Traoré didn't blink. "The people need dignity. Without dignity, stability is just another form of slavery." The air in the room grew thick, heavy. Small beads of sweat formed on foreheads, not just from the heat, but from the tension now rooting deep. By the end of the meeting, Traoré knew he had drawn an invisible line. On one side, those who carried the flame. On the other, those who preferred the comfortable shadows of submission. That night, alone in his office, Ibrahim opened the ancient scrolls again. By the light of a dim lamp, he read his great-grandfather's words. "When betrayal is among you, do not fight with hatred, but with the relentless strength of truth." It was easier said than done. Hatred was a burning temptation, especially when every false smile felt like a knife in his back. But he knew he couldn't lose himself. The flame he carried was made of sacrifice, not resentment. In the days that followed, he began to act quietly. Radical reforms were proposed. Anti-corruption laws, mandatory transparency in international negotiations, redistribution of abandoned lands to poor farmers. Each measure was a light cast upon the darkness that had long dominated the underbelly of power. And like all bright light, it attracted even deeper shadows. One night, while returning from an impromptu meeting with community leaders, the car Traoré was traveling in was ambushed. Armed men emerged from the shadows like specters, faces covered, weapons raised. The driver, loyal to Ibrahim since the days of resistance, didn't hesitate. He floored the accelerator trying to break through the blockade, but the vehicle was shot at. Tires burst. The car skidded violently and overturned on the roadside. In the silence broken only by the hum of nocturnal insects, Traoré dragged himself from the wreckage, feeling warm blood trickle from a cut on his forehead. The men approached, their steps heavy on the sand. There was no time for fear. There was no room for hesitation. The medallion hung from his neck, glinting under the moonlight. When the first assailant raised his weapon, Ibrahim rolled to the side, grabbed a stone from the ground, and with a swift and desperate motion, threw it at the man, striking his forehead. The dull sound of the impact echoed in the night. Amid the chaos, one of the men shouted, "Don't kill him! Just take him!" It was an order from someone above those thugs, someone who feared Traoré's death more than his leadership. With instincts sharpened by necessity, Traoré ran. The sparse brush offered little cover, but it was all he had. He ran as if the very blood of his ancestors propelled his legs. Each branch cut his skin, each stone bruised his feet, but he didn't stop. When he finally reached an old abandoned hut, he fell to his knees, exhausted, his body trembling, but his spirit unbroken. There, alone under the starry vault, he grasped the raw truth. The fight wouldn't just be against declared enemies. It would also be against silent traitors, false allies, the ghosts of greed rooted in his own people, and it would be a fight to the end. The next day, Ibrahim Traoré appeared unannounced at the government palace, his face still scarred and his eyes burning with determination. He entered the great hall without warning, letting his presence speak for itself. The gathered ministers and advisors froze when they saw him. Some stood quickly, others remained seated, as if trying to decide whether to fear or confront him. Traoré advanced to the center of the room, the medallion now exposed over his open shirt. "This land will not be bargained for on tables covered in dirty gold," he said, his voice echoing against the high walls. "This leadership belongs to the people, and whoever tries to steal it will pay the price." The silence was absolute. Then, slowly, one by one, some advisors began to stand. Not in defiance, but in respect. It was as if something invisible was breaking in that moment, an old chain of fear and submission being torn away. Idrissa, however, remained seated. His face was a mask of contempt. Traoré walked toward him, stopping a few steps away. He looked him in the eyes, unblinking. "You are not my enemy," he said, in a tone so calm it seemed dangerous. "You are your own gravedigger." Without another word, he turned and left, leaving behind a room plunged into confusion, shame, and fear, but also hope. The hope that perhaps this time, the ancestral fire was not just a memory, but a living force, burning through every injustice, every betrayal, every lie. And Ibrahim Traoré, heir to the flame, would not rest until he saw it illuminate his entire land. That night, as the starry sky silently embraced the sleeping earth, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the ancient flag of the flaming lion, now raised high above the palace. His eyes, hardened by pain and shaped by hope, gazed at the horizon. The warm wind carried the whisper of ancestors, reminding him that true leadership was not a throne, but a continuous sacrifice, and he was ready to be the guardian of the people, the shield against the darkness, the flame that would never fade. Because true leadership is made of courage and eternal legacy.